Hi Ian, that was a great talk you just gave, thanks a lot. I wanted you to talk to me about the Havana Syndrome, because I think it's pretty illustrative of the World Economic Forum or the military-industrial complex, all the same thing. You know, I think it's pretty illustrative in terms of their attitude towards human life.
There's been incidents before that. I mean, it's good that it's got more press now, and I can actually read about it on various places. But the first time I heard about anything like that happening was related to Moscow, where the US Embassy discovered that they were being radiated. They noticed that there seemed to be a lot of sickness there, so they started investigating it from the centre, not telling the staff in the embassy at all. And they found out it was being radiated. Low-level radiation was being beamed across the whole complex that they had in Moscow. They decided to do nothing about it and just watch it. So they effectively played an experiment on their staff without telling anybody. So there was certainly more sickness on it. Roll that forward a few years and you get similar things being done to the women at Greenham Common. All the time they were camped out around that base. Now, whether it was our government or American government that was radiating those women, again, if you look at the names of the people who were there, you know, there were people who died with cancers, various cancers following on from that in the years following. Of course, it's very difficult to say, I'm dying of cancer and it was caused by that incident 20 years ago or 30 years ago. So it's a very difficult one. It's great for the people who are doing it. And yes, Havana Syndrome was something similar. It's just come out a lot more recently, but yeah, it's real. And that just does show that there is some official recognition that it happens, and it demonstrates that radio frequency radiation affects human tissue, and in a negative way. You may have heard me say earlier on that we use it in diagnostic techniques with things like ECGs and EEGs. That's radio frequency radiation. So, you know, we do that as a diagnostic, not to make a change, but it obviously recognises changes. Maybe we can argue that that doesn't have any particular influence or effect, it's just taking the information out. And it's also used therapeutically with the TENS machine and the PEMF machines, pulsed electromagnetic frequency radiation, which are used both in a complementary sense as well, so-called alternative or complementary therapies, and it's also used by mainstream therapies as well, all around the world. I have friends who work in that sector. It doesn't make any logical sense to then argue that it cannot possibly have any negative effect, because clearly it has an effect. So if that can be positive, it can be negative as well. It has to be that. So you cannot accept one way without considering the other way as well.
Okay, brilliant. On a selfish note, I have fibromyalgia, which means, you know, I have nerve damage. You know what that is? It's brain damage, essentially. Should I move to Chile, or should I buy those products you were talking about before?
Yeah, I certainly think fibromyalgia is a very tricky sort of diagnosis, isn't it? And I certainly think it has an effect. I mean, one of the interesting things about earthing was as a healing modality, but it does do that, and I've actually tested that on some people. A few years ago now, I was working with a drop-in centre for mostly elderly people, and I did some tests with them, and it showed that when they sat on an earthing mat and connected, it drained the charge that the radio frequencies from my computer we were using as a tool had by some 80% at least. So I do know that that's what it will do. You can also get little pads, some patches to put on. I showed you the earthing mat in there.
Yeah.
You can get an anklet to put around, or a wristlet to put around that. You can also get sticky pads that you can put where you feel the pain. You can put a pad and sleep on that overnight. Sky, the cyclists in France and the Tour de France some years ago, were the first group in sport to use it, and they put their cyclists every night in an earthed sleeping bag. And they said the results of doing that were really good. You can find that testing or that episode on the internet. Sky and grounding, something like that should be fine for you. And some of them, when they had an injury, they would put a contact near the injury, a bruise or something, or a strained muscle.
Yeah.
And the cyclists said they felt so much better in the morning.
Interesting.
Really, really
Interesting.
helped, yeah.
And is it true that in Russia that they are teaching the damage of electromagnetic frequencies in their medical schools?
I don't know if they're teaching it in the schools, but I do know they're a lot hotter about radio frequencies. In schools, they've, I think, banned it or restricted it in junior schools, primary schools.
I should have said universities, I think, in medical schools.
I don't know. I don't know if it's been taught. I wouldn't surprise me, actually, because the scanner was a healing device that was brought out many years ago. That came out of Russia as a treatment, as a PEMF device, and you can buy a handheld device. They're not cheap. I think the last time I looked, they're about $6,000. But you can get home use versions of that for between £500, something like that. And they can work, they can help, yeah. So the Russians are ahead of the game.
The main takeaway is that there are some measures that we can take to prevent being radiated. You just need to be aware of it, and you do have to spend a little bit of money and get some products.
Yeah, you can protect yourself as an individual in many different ways. Avoiding it is obviously a valuable thing, and we can also protect other people by doing things like objecting to mask applications and through the planning portal. That's one of the things that I show people how to do, and it's a good practical thing that we can do. All around the country, people are getting masks refused, and every refusal of a mask is a hole in the network, and that network is really important for all the things that are going on with us at the moment.
Okay, brilliant. Well, thanks very much, Ian.
Okay.
Cheers, appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Thanks for the interview. Yeah, bye now.